Hi, Alaina. Hi.
Hey, we're here. We did it.
Hey, do you want to start by doing a little energetic cleansing just to clear the space?
Sure. Sure. So welcome everybody. I think it's really important before we kind of delve into what our first little discussion is today. My name is Alaina. I'll introduce myself a little bit later, but I would like to invite us to drop down together to be able to open up sacred space within ourselves for this Magdalene portal that we are about to enter into together because we're doing this together. It's really important that we honor the vibration of where we're at, where our frequencies are, where we've been the last week, last few days, what we're bringing in, because there's portals everywhere. But for us to really hone in on the intention and perhaps the grounding that we need so that we can um, access those higher pieces of information and jewels that we want today. Okay. So I invite you all to bring your hand onto your chest, that sacred place where we hold our hearts. And I invite you to close your eyes as long as you feel comfortable doing so. But remember, our world becomes unlimited when we close the physical eyes and remember that the turning inwards is where home really is, while we are in this form, most especially. So I invite you now to take a nice, slow, deep breath as if you are breathing in through your nose like a straw, very slowly sipping it, pushing your belly out slightly, and then rising your chest to bring in that full capacity of that beautiful breath. And as you exhale, drop those shoulders, relax that jaw, smooth out the forehead. Trust that in this moment, your breath is the bridge between your body and your mind. So I invite you to take another slow, deep breath in through your nose, pushing that belly out a little longer, a little deeper in the breath, a little slower, bringing in all that energy, that prana, that life force. It's more than just air that we are breathing. And when you are ready, you hold it. Find that holding at the top of your breath. Where you see that holding is what grounds us and anchors us into the two worlds that we are connected to, the physical world, the ethereal world. And when you're ready, you exhale and you drop those shoulders even more. And I want you to focus on that sensation of you holding your heart, that feeling that brings you back to the center of you, remembering again that this is where home really is. We seek so many things outside of ourselves, but in this moment of connecting, using the bridge of your breath, that you remind yourself that it's always been you holding you in this world and beyond. And I want you to feel that beautiful heartbeat below your hand, your sacred drum, beating for you every moment of every day. Never asking for a break, just wanting everything that you are to experience in this world to be full of joy, compassion, love. But of course, we live in a world of duality. And so your sacred drum, she carries a lot for so many. She carries the parts of you that need to be so desperately held. And so you are holding you, and we breathe even deeper, even slower now, as we call upon all those who guide us in this world, in all worlds, in all timelines, in all dimensions, all parts of ourselves, the multidimensional self. We call upon our highest form that is always connected to source, to God, creator. There's so many words that we can use, and yet it is nameless, formless, flowing through all of us, connecting us in this very moment in the great ocean of life. Keep breathing, keep waving in the ocean with your breath. And feel all of your ancestors and your guides stepping through the portals that you open through your heart to come and guide you today, to be here present with us. As they laugh with joy and ease, knowing that you remember who you are, that we are not separate from them, that perhaps the physical form is the illusion, but we're here to dream together. So take one more deep breath in, feeling that anchoring, trusting that we are in sacred space, that the Holy Spirit is with us, and we are ready to open the portals of the highest vibration, of inspiration, intuition, but to be the Magdalene portals, the women who stand at the edge of those two worlds to find the balanced female, the balanced woman within herself, trusting her intuition, trusting what she is seeking, and to learn to play and to have fun in the garden. And so we take a nice deep breath in, breathing into our fingers and our toes, feeling and wiggling, trusting that we are here to remember together, that we are mirrors to each other, that we are not separate from what we seek. It's already here. Let us open those portals. And when you're ready, opening those eyes and returning to the form of physical.
I love that line, let those portals be what you seek. How powerful.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for leading
Thank
me and everyone else through that really cool opening and clearing. Do you want to talk a little bit about your background and
Yeah, sure. So my background, I am a former nurse. I was a mental health nurse for 17 years. And I did everything from individual counseling, teaching day programs, facilitating many things for clients. But I often found that the medical field was not where true healing was occurring. It was occurring in the moments when people were opening their own portals of compassion, self-compassion, their portals of looking out to the world, that there are so many opportunities and options to feel better about themselves. And it wasn't always in that medical system. And don't get me wrong, we need the acute system when we need it. We need the, in those situations. But when we're dealing with our emotional health, our mental health, our spiritual health, which to me, a lot of what's happening is a spiritual crisis. So my work kind of ended during the pandemic, and I decided to homeschool my children. But all the while, for many years prior to that, I trained as a Kundalini yoga teacher, which I did for my own healing journey. I also trained as a hypnobirthing facilitator after my son was born. So there's many things that have come along the way in helping people to access higher consciousness within themselves, to trust in their own wisdom. And again, that the answers aren't outside of ourselves. We have many options, but the answers are always within ourselves. So a big part of me, I think, in learning to do that for myself came from my healing journey. When I was 24 years old, I had breast cancer, and it was a gift. As crazy as that sounds, it was a gift to be able to walk that path. I truly felt very connected to the Divine Mother, raised Catholic, but my altar is here. So for me, God was always present in my life, but the connection that there was a higher power within me and that I was always connected to Source in some way was really what led me through my healing journey, which led me to the mountains in Peru, seeing a shaman, and journeying many different levels, which we can go through, of course, in our wonderful discussions here in the Magdalene portal. But yeah, so I bring a lot of perhaps perspective from that higher, access point of, how much we can increase our vibratory frequency, our harmonics, because everything is harmonics, everything is energy. Even my breath, even what we're saying, we can measure it all. So if we can understand that it's all about um, shifting those harmonics, and we can do that by shifting our brain waves, slowing them down, right? There's many, many ways to get there. Heart brain coherence, we'll talk all about that in future videos perhaps. But yes, that's me, maybe in a nutshell. And I live on a lovely big farm in the middle of nowhere, and chickens and dogs and cats and kids and husbands, one husband. That's enough. And and a wonderful life. So here I am, and my wonderful friend Ashleigh, who I think I know that was divinely guided. We were divinely guided to one another, and maybe Ashleigh will share that if you'd like. But I feel very honored and privileged to be initiating this portal with you. So thank you, Ashleigh, for being, the nuts and the bolts behind the scenes, everybody, just to let you know. She makes it all happen. I just show up.
Keeping the whip going, right? Keeping the whip going. Yeah, and we met because you were, I can't even remember how I found you other than through Divine Connection, but I think maybe you were doing, there was like an ad or something. It was on social media, I think, regardless, and you were teaching hypnobirthing. So when I was 6 months pregnant, probably, with my little guy, and we connected through that. And then there was probably a, a period of time after he was born. I think I saw you the following summer, right? So we had done hypnotherapy in the spring, and then had the baby, started surviving what was going to change all of our lives. And then the following summer, I think I saw you, so things were a little more adjusted by then. So yeah, we've been inseparable ever since, right?
Although physically, we're
Right, exactly.
next to each other,
Despite the
sadly.
yeah, and I come to this work, similar to you, through healthcare, through wellness. I discovered nutrition when my dad was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and it was early onset Alzheimer's. So that played a big part in my role because as a caregiver, they didn't have a lot of options. They didn't have a lot of information, really didn't share a lot to really empower you. And of course, the default from all the medical professionals, well, it's a terminal illness. Like you just have to accept that. And so I kept saying, well, you could at least make his quality of life better. And I know they preach a lot about making quality of life better, but as someone who was in my mid-20s when he was diagnosed, they did not do very much to support me at all in that journey of being a caregiver because nobody really was as young as I was. So not that I met anyone who was as young as what I was, and I know that's becoming more common now, where more people are speaking out about it. But I mean, this is also, my dad passed away 9 years ago tomorrow, so the times have changed even in that decade since he's been gone, and 17 years since he was diagnosed. So and I found nutrition through that. I found holistic health through that. I found holistic energy practice from that. I really was interested and curious about what happens after we die when he was in the process of dying, because saying to the nurses, like, well, where do we go when we die? And nobody could really give me a concrete answer. And from there, I found the Akashic Records, and I spontaneously went into the Akashic Records the first time I did when I was doing a plant attunement. So I had my little guy at that point. I was doing a plant attunement, and I just catapulted into the Akashic Records, where flowers, were speaking this language and really telling me a lot about what flowers needed to be used for in order to expand this consciousness and really raise awareness for people. So from that point, I think at that point I'd probably been a flower essence practitioner for about a year. So things have just spiraled and changed and grown, and as we all do. But I'm sure that we will talk more about the practices that we use and rely on to support ourselves and our families. But I think today we wanted to talk just a little bit about channeling and what that means, and maybe you have like a definition that would be helpful or something that kind of like guides your practice.
Yeah, like in terms of channeling, I think it's really first and foremost key that we look to it that we're always channeling. We are creative beings. We've come here to create. So there's so many ways to channel information, creativity, understanding, integration. So if we can kind of normalize this idea that channeling isn't something that only psychics or mediums can do, this is anyone and everyone because we're already doing it. So when we think about it from that perspective, what does channeling do for us in a way? You know, in and of itself, it's us asking higher questions. It's asking and trusting that there is this wisdom that I'm connected to, because you are, whether or not we believe in it or not, it's there, right? Talk about the Akashic fields, right? That there is, again, the ability for anyone and everyone to do it. For me, channeling has changed my life in a lot of different ways, because when I started channeling, and at that time I didn't realize it was channeling, it was just automatic writing, which I guess I was familiar with it. And this was after my son was born. So he's soon to be 14. So this was, quite some time ago. And so when I started, it was just an outlet. I had a journal. As you mentioned before, Ashleigh, the death and dying piece came to me as well when I was nursing, and it was palliative with children. And that was something that I did before I had children, but it caused me to really start asking the questions of what is beyond, as you're saying, right? And those children who showed me that they can survive in a vessel that was never meant to survive, for example, and to watch the beauty of a child being nurtured in a moment and satiate, but a brainstem is not connected. How is that possible? What is the purpose of a beautiful child, of a soul coming into this world like that, right? So I really started to perhaps gear into that in the sense that there's more. So when I had my son and I had moments of emotional, perhaps regression, in the sense of after we have children, sometimes we're not feeling so connected to our tribe, right? Especially this day and age. So for me, it was an outlet, and it was more about, I said to myself, I'm not even going to, which is so funny, I'm not even going to think of what I'm going to write. I'm just going to write. And by doing that, there was no pressure. There was nothing. It was just, I just started to write. And actually I have, I wanted to share one with you. So I've explained it to Ashley before. So my method, again, is just, I'm trusting words. I'm just seeing these words and I'm just writing them. And so that's how it started for me. But what ended up happening is it comes out very poetic, very ancient language, like stuff. So I knew early on, as I started rereading these things, like I had to really decipher in a way what was coming through. I know your process is very different, Ashley, right? For me, I didn't really have
I
a
think we
structured process.
we have in common that, like, as you're seeing the words, I think we both have in common that clairvoyance is probably one of our top.
Yeah,
I call them intuitive languages. Other people call them clairs, but would you say that's true? Like, to be able to actually visualize words as they were coming in, is that?
absolutely. I am clairvoyant all the way. Clairaudient is my last, as
Oh,
I feel a little bit different, because I feel like you have more clairaudience. So very rarely will I hear something. Um, I have, but when I do my connecting work, which I speak to it as energy weaving, I don't call myself a psychic or a medium, although those, again, skills that are learned that we all
100%
have.
are, yes.
Whether or not you're tuning your antenna, because that's what we are. We are one big antenna, and we can go into many different videos later on about what that looks like. And there's so many great minds today, Joe Dispenza being one of them. There's so many great minds as to understanding how we are really doing this, not pseudoscience. So yeah, definitely I have the clairvoyant, the clairsentient is really, really big for me. So I just sense things, I know things, and the clairvoyant for sure. So to me, those are the big pieces. And maybe that's, again, not realizing, because I wasn't tapped into my psychic abilities in the sense
Don't
of
have the
just,
structure that I do, because
yeah,
for you it doesn't mostly, it came through such a flow and such a natural awareness, whereas I've been a little bit more
yeah.
methodical in terms of learning and then now teaching what I learned. Um, yeah, and that can make a difference too, right? Because the language that people might use to describe something, it's like you're just, that's naturally part of my awareness versus me, where I'm like, let's try and understand this a little bit better. It's my Capricorn moon likes to have that structure, and it's a form of safety to really like be able to share it with other people too.
And that's really important, right? Because again, this is what I love about you and I too. And again, walking those two worlds in a way to find that balanced woman within us. is that, we can sometimes really support each other in that sense, where I'm a lot more right-brained, non-linear, as you're going to maybe see that I like to go over here, but I can always come back.
Yeah.
Whereas you, Ashley, you, as you said, structure, linear, practicality, which again, more the divine masculine, and perhaps I'm accessing more of the divine feminine traits as I'm channeling. But either way, it's possible because we have both of those, whether you're a man or a woman. We have the electrical and magnetic components within us, the right and left hemispheres. We are shifting that. And I do believe later on we can chat more about this, of course. There's so many things we can open up to discussion.
What kind of like tips or
We're
advice?
awakening to it.
What kind of tips or advice would you have for someone who's just getting started? So you mentioned automatic writing. That's obviously a big practice that a lot of people get into, but like how, I guess the thing between different types of channeling that I notice is that it's always in a flow state. In order to
Yeah.
really trust and to have accurate information, you have to be in a flow state. You have to, in some ways a little bit surrender, make sure that you're protected, make sure you're grounded. But there also has to be like a surrendering that happens because we cannot access channeled information when we're in a state of stress or a state of high emotional volatility. I think that's really important. And people don't underestimate, right? They'll ask a question that they have an emotional attachment to, and then how do we get out of that emotional place, because those emotions will block. It's like static for that aspect of that antenna, right? It's a bunch of static because the
That's
emotions
right.
are.
I love that visual because it makes so much sense. So when you are in a low mood, right? So think of frequency, right? You are less likely to connect to those higher frequencies. And not that they're above us, right? I mean, again, from that linear perspective, we think things are above us, God's above us. No, we're swimming in the great universe of all of life, right? So, but when you are in a low state of frequency, and again, the quality of your emotions, let's say, is also what determines your heart rhythm, your brain rhythms, right? So that's shifting into perhaps not being able to connect with the same level of an antenna that has a clear channel, like you're saying.
Exactly. Yeah.
If you look at, I love that you said that, right? Because it is important to think, well, I'm just going to go channel and the idea of writing in our journal when we're in an emotional,
After you've had some
health.
McDonald's and your channel is just like gummed up and yucky and you
Yeah.
haven't put your feet on the
But,
ground in a week, and yeah, no,
right, right.
it's not a
I'm
safe.
thinking, yeah, exactly. Not a safe space. When you're not feeling in a safe emotional space, let's say. I mean, don't get me wrong, there are spaces for that, right? You can still journal, right? Getting the emotion out, which is important, helping you to process, which I thought that's what I was doing when I was doing that for the first time, right? Because again, I was in an emotional state with my son in the sense of just feeling disconnected. I wasn't necessarily in a depressive state. Depression is not a place. It's a state of being, right? So we are fluxing in and out of that. So I had somewhat of that, but wasn't like I was in an angry. So I'm going to say more specifically to anger, when you're and those lower frequencies, anger, resentment, because again, what are you then looking to open up to? Because your vibration won't be opening up to the higher wisdom and knowledge. So it's also important to say that ideally, right? So this is ideal, what we're saying. But in reality, if you feel called to do it and you are in a state like that, trust that maybe
And
you
like
have
you
that
said,
space to do that. But then that's when we bring in, as Ashley's saying, the grounding techniques prior to, and bringing the breath back in.
you
Okay.
have to. You have to, because say of any intuitive practice, if you're not grounded, it is not a safe place. You can connect to all kinds of energies that are not going to be helpful for you, and they're not going to be helpful for your own kind of
That's right.
intuitive guidance.
So other things we can do, so other clearing space, breath work, right? Because again, as I mentioned earlier, as we dropped in together, the breath is the bridge between the body and the mind. So if the body's doing something crazy and the mind's doing something else, well, how do I make them connect that so that the antenna's working? So connect with the breath. And when you think of a stressful situation, do the opposite of what you're normally doing in a stressful situation, right? Because that's the breath that does not carry us there. It's shallow, it's tight, it's usually in the chest, usually reverse breathing, perhaps, think of posture, stress. So we have lower half of our lungs that we don't open up to when we're only breathing from the upper chest, which creates anxiety, depression, things like that. We're not getting the amount of energy we need because it's energy, right? We need the energy. So if we're breathing it in, if I'm not accessing the belly, which is what we were doing. So when you push your belly out on an inhale, we push down the diaphragm, which allows the lower part of your lungs to inflate. So we can go in future episodes of really getting into the juiciness of slowing all that down and really feeling what it's like to, assess our breath and move through different breathing techniques, because obviously that can be very helpful. So breath work, grounding techniques. You mentioned trust. Trust to me is the first and foremost. Again, I am trusting that with my intention, I'm not connecting to anything that is negative.
Yes. So you said the most important part there, which is it's hard not to trust when you don't have the other pieces in place, but that intention piece, that intention of connecting to higher wisdom and higher guidance is key. Set an
That's it.
intention every time. So in the Akashic Records, we obviously set our intention by saying our prayer, closing
That's it.
prayer, opening prayer, and any other practice, like even a line or two, just about what you're hoping to get out of it. I start even every Akashic Record session where I'm, automatic writing for myself or something along those lines, like what is my intention for this practice, what am I hoping
Yeah.
to get out of this. I don't always hit the nail on the head, because sometimes our guides, our spirit team, is going to give us the information that we need, not the information that we want. I have been humbled so many times by that. However, that aspect of intention is, to me, that's foundational to really all spiritual practice. Grounding
Agreed.
and intention.
Yeah. And I like that you discern between the two, right? So trust doesn't always equate to intention at the same time, because you can still be intending something, but you might not be trusting it fully. Like, oh my God, what's going to happen? Can I
Yeah.
do that? Right? I'm not trusting myself in that moment, which is so human, right? We're here to find the contrast and learn, who am I past that point? Can I,
I would
right?
almost say, like, trust is not something you can do. Trust is something that you have, like, over time, practice, having that consistent practice, right? So you might tap in, you might do your automatic writing or other intuitive practice, and you might just do it for 2 minutes. And then the
Yeah.
next day you might do it for 5 minutes. And then maybe you just do it 5 minutes every day, or at least a couple times a week. And slowly over time, you're building that muscle. You're building that trust, because you're able to see the information that comes through. You're able to see how it plays out in your life. But I don't
Yeah.
think it's necessarily something that we can't simply tell our minds,
Well, I
like,
think it's both, because
trust me.
this is the divine masculine in the sense of who you are, right? Learning to build on that process, right? To build on something, to create something. For me, from perhaps the perspective that I come, sometimes I just have to trust. And it's perhaps more of that divine feminine flow of, I don't need to know. I don't need to um, uh, judge myself in the moment, or the things that I want are going to happen or not. I sometimes have to let go. So there's maybe faith is also attached to that level of trust, that I don't even know what I need in this moment, but I'm going to trust to me. So could be also linguistics that we're using, the idea that's just different words that we're putting to it. But I do like, again, how we're discerning that there is different avenues when we start this process. Just explore, be playful,
What
right?
about, how do people know, so when they start this process of channeling, whether or not that's through the Akashic Records or automatic writing or any other practice of just sitting in silence, being present with your breath, how do people know that their experience or their information is accurate? Because I think that's something that people really struggle with too.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's many different avenues I think that we can use. So for example, kinesiology, muscle testing, right? So there's different sciences that could potentially support, again, more of that practical mind that needs to know definitively, is this the right information? So again, sometimes trust is part of that too, that I'm trusting that it is. For me, I think the body, so again, kinesiology being a way of looking at this, the body really, it never lies. So if we can, and what that means is that we store our emotion in our bodies. And if something doesn't feel right, we know. So some people feel it in the chest, like, oh, no, some people feel it in the gut. So we're talking a little bit more about discernment here, and how the body also shows us if something is right or not.
Do you ever get those truth bumps?
Goosebumps. Oh gosh, yeah. So something gets said, and all of a sudden my whole body is like one big goosebump. Where's that coming from? That's not me. Like it's not even when whatever that thing is being said. It's not that I'm like integrating something necessarily in the moment. It's just something was said, and all of a sudden my body's responding to that. So what I always think that to me, that's spirit showing me the validation, right? That
Almost like
because
a
think of
resonance, right?
antenna,
Like
right? We're getting
body.
antenna, we're getting little messages. So the body is one way to show us, test and muscle testing. Maybe you want to speak a little bit more to muscle testing, dowsing. So there are ways that we can then, take a look at what I've just written, or maybe what just came through, I do really suggest that people write it down. So in your moment of just being open to a channel, in the sense I am guided, I'm trusting that I'm only connecting to that higher aspect of who I am. And that higher aspect of who I am is always connected to the source of all of creation, right? So again, I am accessing these levels and bringing it to more of a specific where I can write it down, right? Because oftentimes it feels like a dream. If you're in a meditative state, slowing your brain waves down, creating some heart brain coherence, you are accessing higher guidance, because again, the tuning fork is getting ready. But when you're in that state, you sometimes don't want to come out of it, right? Just allowing it to come through. It could be 5 minutes, 10 minutes, it could be hours. People sit there, right? But when you have a moment, I definitely suggest afterwards writing it down, point form, and kind of maybe pushing it to the side. You can review it if you'd like. Again, my brain is like, I've released what it is.
Yeah, me
I'm going to
too.
come back to it later.
Yeah, and sometimes it'll be months before I read back what came
Yeah.
through. I mean, unless it's something I'm struggling with and it's an answer, I kind of need some
Yeah.
guidance to it, but a little bit of space always
So
helps.
how do you, in terms of the question you're asking, how do you discern
Body.
whether or not it is right for
The
you?
body's always the real metronome. I think those truth bumps is always a good guidance. And the one thing that I teach my students is that it's really easy to tell whether or not information is accurate and true intuitively if it's coming from a place of love and support. So
Mhm.
generally, intuitive messages are not coming from
Hiring.
a place of
Yeah.
fear. They're generally not. If it feels like you need to make a decision immediately, if you feel like there's a lot of pressure, it's generally not true higher guidance and true wisdom, right? We can be influenced by all kinds of energies around us. But coming from a place of love and coming from a place of support. I always say, like, our spirit team sometimes will give us guidance that kicks us in the pants a bit, right? A little bit of information where I wasn't quite expecting that, and I know I need to get off my duff, and I know I need to do that. So there can be a little bit of like, we just want better for you. This is kind of where you're headed, and this is the goal post that's there, part of your intention. But at the same time, yeah, there has to be there's a level of love and support that comes through with intuitive guidance and channeled information that you just simply, one there's one I don't know if it's a practice or if it's a practitioner that talks about, sometimes your first experiences of channeling, depending on what you're connecting with and what your intention is to connect with, that it's just, I love you, I love you, I love you, I love you. And the person was so frustrated because they said, like, I'm asking questions, I want the information to my guidance. And they had a hard time getting out of that loop, but it was like, we need you to know how much we love you so that you can know that this practice is supported and you're loved and that you have the trust and the confidence to be able to move forward, right? I think they went in for like 5 weeks. For like 5 weeks, and same message just kept coming through. I love you, I love you, I love you. And
So
eventually,
again,
more.
that's the perfect equation, right? So again, that higher vibration of emotion, the higher quality of emotion and expression of love is what's amplifying your overall frequency, right? And again, looking back to some of the work that we now know is being done, again, Dr. Joe Dispenza. So what they're showing us, again, when we create that feeling, as we're connecting our heart and our brains together, and we're creating that feeling of love. So it could be somebody you love, it could be something you love, it could be, sometimes people have a problem with that word love, right? So if we push out the semantics of it, it's a feeling. So by being in that state, again, you're going to be able to resonate to those higher frequencies that are going much quicker than this dense form. And our emotional guidance system is really, I think, what we're speaking to. And when you look back at, again, some great discussions that have happened over many years in time with other channelers, for example, Abraham Hicks, right? She always speaks to the emotional guidance system, right? And that when something is right, you're going to emotionally feel good with it, because that means that you're naturally in alignment with that statement, that belief, that intention, that if it's a good emotion. And so she speaks to that there's really only two emotions, right? So thinking of love or whatever you want to say that is, that's a higher vibration. So everything that's underneath that, joy, humor, adventure, whatever that is underneath it, right? It feels good, pleasure, it feels good. And then the opposite of that, right? Again, world of duality, opposite of what that is. So if you want to say it as hate or whatever that is, but it can be described many things: anger, resentment, fear. So in those moments, and we speak to this again, even in the mental health field, the thoughts that you're carrying in this moment, is it resonating? So when you think of a thought, does it feel good? So I'm not worthy. Well, we know where we can go with that. Well, how does it feel? Is it on the more positive state of emotional self, or is it the negative? Well, we know the answer to that. So it's this understanding that we can name whatever it is, and we can have bazillions of names for it, but there really is only two emotion. So if something is resonating with you, that maybe you want to at least trust enough to be open to more guidance, right? We don't have to just walk every path because I've channeled it and that's where how I'm living my life. We still have to be in this physical form. We still have to make conscious, physical, practical decisions.
We do?
But sometimes, sometimes, yes, we do. But if something is not feeling right, that's when our emotions are showing us, our body is showing us it's not in alignment with who I am. Because if it was, it'd be somewhere underneath that category.
But it helps people from the perspective of channeling, of knowing whether or not the intuitive guidance is true and correct.
Yeah, so this is how so it's all about discernment, and nobody will be able to discern like you, right? We all have to discern for ourselves, and we all have to learn how to discern for ourselves, especially right now. So I'll leave it at that.
Is there anything else that you kind of wanted to mention on this topic of channeling and everyday channeling?
um, I think we've covered so much, right? We've covered a lot of kind of the idea that anyone can do it, right? We didn't anticipate necessarily we were going to do this 10 years ago, or this is awakening. And I do believe that we are awakening to a higher vibration. And again, there's lots of discussion in the many science fields, right? In the quantum discussions that are happening now. We have to realize that there is so much more to who we are, and that a lot of it is actually awakening within us. So whether it's within our own DNA, whether it's within our own awareness, our consciousness of it. For example, waking up one day and be like, oh, I really like that thing, and I didn't like that 2-3 years ago. Or I have this skill that was kind of laying dormant and I didn't really realize I could do these things, channeling being one of them. So I think it's just important to really normalize this, that I believe, and I'm not sure how you feel, but I do feel that more and more of these kinds of discussions and being open to these kinds of discussions is happening than we realize.
Yeah, and I truly think, like as you said, that everybody channels, even if you just think someone who's involved in a fitness practice or a marathon practice, right? They're in a state of flow where they're just able to really relax and to trust and to have that divine, experience of, maybe running an amazing race, or maybe they, are composing music or something along those lines, where it's literally like that flow state to me is equivalent to that channeling state, when we can get into that state where, time flies by. Like you said, it could be 5 minutes, it could be hours at a time. That flow state, people don't even realize, like that's like that's the state that we're in. We're in a sort of trance state where the brain waves have been trained.
Yeah, it's a hypnagogic state, right? So it naturally happens, right, when we go into lower brainwave states, which is just relaxation. That's it. That's all. Again, the breath is connecting us there. And the understanding of hypnosis in and of itself, no one hypnotizes you, right? That's just you allowing suggestions to happen because you are in a slower brainwave state, which means that you don't have that same discerning factor within the brain state of consciousness, that what is being suggested to you, hopefully positively, then the subconscious mind kind of takes an imprint of it and stores it away. So this is how we can access these consciousness, these other higher consciousness states, because we take a lot of the electricity out, which is the thinking piece, and we move it into more of that flow state, as you're saying. Yeah, there's lots of little exciting little jewels, I think, that you and I not even realizing what we can share. But I think, like many who are doing this today and perhaps tuning in, are going to probably be saying that they resonate. Maybe they've had conversations with their friends about this stuff, or maybe they're starting to learn more about it, or maybe they're feeling pulled. Because obviously, if you found this video, there's no coincidence, right? Because it's resonance.
Yeah, and people will be drawn to it as a way to,
Yeah, for the
prove their
portal.
own practice or
Open the door. And that's what a portal really is, right? We don't want to also make this to be too etheric, right? In the sense, because again, we're still in this physical form. But when we access these, altered consciousness states, without plant medicine, because what we're doing is without plant medicine, other than, of course, our beautiful flower essences. That's something different. And not to say that you can't use plant medicine, but what we're doing here in our discussion, we can help you get there without it. It's just the breath, right? But yeah, there's many exciting little, I think, adventures we're going to have through this portal of the Magdalene.
yay, it's so nice to chat with you. It's so
Lovely to
nice
chat.
to be able to talk about a topic that I know is very near and dear to both of us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So stay tuned, everybody. I think we've got a few more up our sleeve. And if you're resonating, then perhaps you are a Magdalene, a mystic, a healer.
All right. Click the like button, the subscribe button, all the things that people do on YouTube.
Yeah. And connect with us. And in future videos, we'll talk more about, again, like you said, some of the services that we're offering to connect with people more. But if not, you can connect with us here, and we'd love to share that beautiful resonance with you.
Yeah, I love that. Well, I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. You too.